Welcome to another episode of Two Old Geeks Talking. Now on the World Wide Web.
Hey, welcome to Two Old Geeks Talking. I'm Rob.
I am Trace.
And today we are discussing conventions.
Sure.
So,
all right.
Go ahead.
No, go for it.
So, how would you define a convention?
Well, a convention is when a group of people get together that enjoy a certain thing.
Exactly. That's exactly my thought. It doesn't matter if it's fishing or video games or horror movies. It's when people get together.
Horror movies.
Horror.
Okay, yeah. Or gun shows, horror things like that.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So that's what a convention is to me. It's where a group of like-minded people with the same interests gets together. Now, you know me, I like to study the history of things. I like history and how that's involved. And so we're just going to knock some of this out and then get into a little more interesting stuff. So, when was the first Comic-Con? Oh, not Comic-Con. I'm sorry. First assembly. First con. In my opinion, I think it goes back to Cro-Magnon Man when he shoved two rocks in between a rock between two sticks, tied it together, and was like, showed his whole plan. Here, look, I gotta have it. He was excited about that, and he was sharing that, right?
Yeah.
So is that not really like the first gathering of people?
I don't know. I ain't that old.
Yeah,
okay. The oldest cons I remember is like the old Trek conventions. So like before Comic Cons were in this area, not necessarily before there were Comic Cons.
Right.
But in our area there were Trek conventions. Now you're not a big Star Trek fan, but I am. So you went and you had people dressed up. You had Star Trek merchandise. You had Star Trek celebrities, and so I got to meet a lot of the original series and Star Trek Next Generation cast, and had fun. And that's the first time I saw cosplay.
Okay.
And that's really where it kind of started the little seed where eventually I started cosplaying at some point.
Right. So I'm thinking that conventions actually started with like exposition and things like world fairs and stuff. Like the very first world fair was in 1851 at Hyde Park in London, England. And it lasted for 6 months. And the reason they had it for that long is because back then people couldn't travel like they do now.
Yeah.
So they had it for 5 months. They had it for 5 months so that people could get there. And then a decade later, in 1876, of course, the United States could not be outdone, so they had to have their own exposition and call it a World Fair. And of course, it was held in Philadelphia. And instead of doing 5 days, 5 months, they had to do it 6 months because America, we got to do everything bigger and better. And they were actually celebrating their independence. That was the whole purpose of that. Now, the first geek-related convention, in my opinion, happened July 2nd, 1939. Now, it was called the World Science Fiction Convention, better known today as Worldcon, one of the oldest known and largest conventions, and it has to do with everything sci-fi. And I know what you're asking, like what kind of sci-fi stuff did they have in 1939? Well, one of the very first movies was actually a sci-fi movie. It was called Le Voyage dans la Lune or something. If I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, y'all let me know. The black and white movie where these two people are riding a rocket and they shoot it through space and it hits the moon in the eye.
Yeah. It's kind of an iconic picture of the
Right, and then they had books, not comic books, but they had books. And
I remember those.
Yeah, right. They were thick too, man. One of the most popular sci-fi books back then was called The Black Destroyer. So 1939 was actually considered the golden age of sci-fi. And that's what pretty much, in my opinion, kicked off conventions. Now, the very first, I won't even consider this the first comic book convention. But in 1963, there was a guy named Chuck. Well, his name was Charles Moss. He got together with a guy named Bill Rieger And they decided to try to have a Comic-Con, but the problem was it was in the middle of nowhere in Nebraska, and it flopped. Nobody showed up. It just wasn't successful. So that's not really considered the first, but it was the first attempt. So later on, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. I mean, to me, like, if you tried to distill Comic Cons down to what I like best about a Comic Con, and to me, you've got obviously comics,
right?
But comics aren't as popular as they once were.
Not now,
right? Not now.
Not now.
And then you've got the collectible toys, which is a huge collectible toy market. I mean, when we had the last booth we had, we saw far more collectible toys than we did comics. Then you got celebs, so that's a big thing. Television, movies, celebrities coming there doing signings and photo shoots. And then the cosplay. I really like the cosplay too. It's fun to cosplay, and it's fun to see some of the imaginative cosplay that other people come from. So for me, when I go, that's what it's broke down to. Now, you talked about some of those early cons. There probably was no celebrities, no cosplay, no collectible toys, I would imagine. Probably it was just hardcore comic fans.
Right. And Ben, you mentioned about there actually being people there of interest. So the very first actual con that was considered a success, a true success, was done by a gentleman named Jerry Balls. And if y'all don't know him, he's considered the comic book fandom, the father of comic book fandom.
Did you say Harry Balls?
No, Jerry
Balls. Okay.
Jerry. Okay. And he got together, not together, but he got with a 16-year-old young man named Bernie Budis, Budis, and they decided to have a Comic-Con in New York. But their idea was pretty unique because what they decided to do was make it mobile. Mm-hmm. So what they would do is they'd have it in this town for a little bit, like a fair, and then move on to another town and have it again, and then go to another town and have it again. So they made it more mobile. It was the New York ComicCon. Now,
and that's one of your biggest cons now. I mean, your biggest cons now are San Diego,
right?
New York, the one you just mentioned, and then Emerald City, which is in Seattle, Washington. So those are the biggest cons that are out there now in the United States.
Right. Okay, so let me set up this scenario for you.
Okay.
It's 1964. This very first con, very first show they have, right? It is only 5 hours long. Only 56 people show up in attendance. That's not a lot compared to what happens nowadays.
Yeah.
Now, can you guess who was the first person to buy a ticket to that con? He was only 15 years old when he bought.
No, I can't guess.
Okay. George R.R. Martin.
Oh, yeah?
Bought the very first ticket to the very first successful con.
Yeah, he's been I know he's known for the writer of the Fire and Ice series.
Right.
As everybody knows as Game of Thrones, but he's been a huge collector, and he collects Marvel. That's what I collect.
Right.
Old Silver Age and Bronze Age Marvel, and so yeah, he's a huge comic book fan.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that this con in particular is what sparked him being the sci-fi writer he was.
Yeah, it didn't hurt.
But imagine it. He's in this room, a little crowded. Up on the stage is a guy named Dave Tweed or Twid or whatever his name is. He's an intern for Stan Lee. He's basically talking about Marvel's daily ins and outs, what they're doing. Now, while he's sitting there, unbeknownst to him, sneaking in the back door comes Steve Ditko, co-creator of Spider-Man. He comes back there, sits beside Mr. Ball, sitting there, got his hand behind his back, smoking a cigarette. When the little guy on the stage is done with his speech, they turn around and there stands Steve. He's not in a booth. He's not on a stage. He's just sitting there talking to people, just signing autographs and just chilling out with everybody. And it's kind of freaking awesome. And then a young George turns and there's Tom Gill. Now, at the time, y'all might not know who Tom Gill is, but he was the artist for The Lone Ranger. Okay, so he's passing out artwork. Now, is he showing off his things? Like, look at this splash page I made. I drew this cover. No, he's handing out artwork. You know how much he was charging for it?
Back then, I don't know.
Nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
He was literally passing out free artwork from this man. I mean, unbelievable. So, I'm not saying that this sparked George's career,
Right.
but I'd say this probably played a big role in it.
Yeah, there were. You talked about how it was such a small crowd. And of course, it was one of the first
Right.
cons. But I mean, the thing is that geekdom really only peaked out recently. So
Right.
there's people that I consider geeks, lifelong geeks. You and I would be one of them.
Till the end.
Yeah. But then there's, and at one time being called a geek was almost like a negative.
Yeah.
Yeah. But geeks have a word for people that aren't into geeky stuff, and our word is our word is normie. Now you would think normie, normie short for normal,
Right.
and so you wouldn't think that would be a slang, but whenever the cons peaked out, and I personally think they're on the decline. I'll get your opinion here in a second, but when they peaked out, it wasn't because the geeks had swelled. It was because you normies had got interested in geek stuff.
Right.
With the MCU and the CW and so many geek shows on television and streaming services and movies, it became socially acceptable to be a geek. So you got all these people that normally would not step foot into a comic book store, but they collect these slabs now.
Right.
And you got people that normally would never go to a science fiction movie or a superhero movie, but now they do. And so Hollywood figured out that you can make money off of it. So now you got the geeks and the normies. But just like our parents watched Westerns, and that was popular in the day, and Westerns are not popular now. At some point in the future, and I think we're already starting to move that way, I think that the normies are going to leave the Comic-Cons and the geeky culture, and it's just going to be me and you and a few younger geeks as well. But I mean, I think it's on the decline. I think it peaked out with Avengers Endgame, and I think we've been on a steady decline ever since.
See, but we're sneaky. Geeks are sneaky because, people love movies like Blade and other movies, and nobody knew that they were comic book related. So many movies out there are comic book related, and there's so many things that are actually spawned by us geeks that nobody even knows. If it wasn't for a geek, you wouldn't have the iPhone that you're using, or we wouldn't be able to do this YouTube video.
Well, yeah.
So,
I mean, there's geeks and there's nerds, but there's a difference. There's a difference. Like
I think it's
like
fine line.
a geek says the Force is, something George Lucas come up with, and a nerd would say the Force is mass equals velocity, and I mean, so.
But both of them are right.
Yeah, okay. But go ahead.
All right, so we can't mention cons without mentioning San Diego.
Yeah.
So San Diego, like all great things, was created in 1970. Hey. So
You came out in 1970.
yeah, I did.
Yeah.
So when it came out, it wasn't called San Diego Comic-Con. It was called San Diego, the Golden State Comic Convention. They've kind of shortened it down a little bit. So there was an artist named Shel Dwarf, a comic book store owner, Richard Alf, and Kent, sometimes went by Ken, but Kent Kruger, a publisher, decided to do a convention. They seen how well the New York ComicCon went. They kind of wanted to mimic it. And at that time, their very first con, they had 300 people in attendance. That's not a lot compared to nowadays, but it's a lot better than 56, right? So they really had a hard time finding a place to have this. They got a spot at the Grand Hotel, but it was actually in the basement. So, I mean, that being said, some of the people that their ideal was to do exactly pretty much the way the cons are set up now. You've got meet and greets, you've got merchandise, you've got artists, you have all these different things. So it hasn't really changed a lot since 1970. It's just got bigger. You've got more of what they had back then. So as far as writers, they had Ray Bradbury, a very popular sci-fi artist at the time. A little artist, known as Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby.
Right. I've heard of him.
Yeah. And then, of course, Kent Kruger, the publisher, brought one of his writers, which was A.E. Von Vogt. He's a sci-fi writer. I don't know who he is, but back then, at the time, he was fairly popular. So if y'all know who any of the books he wrote or anything like that, put them down in the comment. Anything else you want to add?
Well, I mean, you and I have we've experienced ComicCon from both sides. In other words, as an attendee,
right,
and then as a vendor.
Right.
So which do you? First of all, answer my first question. Do you think Comic-Cons are in the decline? Yay or nay?
I almost say nay.
Okay.
Because think about it. San Diego gets bigger every year.
Yeah, a lot of your big names pulled out of San Diego this year. Like Warner Brothers and a lot of your places didn't advertise.
COVID though, and a lot of stuff like that.
Not this year. Not this year. I mean, your opinion is your opinion, but I'm saying
I'm not saying my opinion is right. I'm just saying
I'm seeing clues that this year's San Diego Comic-Con was smaller in scale. You're not getting that professional. Like Sideshow was one of the biggest booths at San Diego this year, and but typically Marvel's there in real big force, and Warner Brothers is there in big force. A lot of the big companies don't see a need now to be there.
It's because they're doing their own conventions.
Right. Okay. So
that's what irritates me is Disney used to be a part
right.
of it.
Exactly.
And they pulled out, started having their own convention.
Disney's got to do their own thing. That's why they got their own streaming service.
And I'd say Marvel. That's why Marvel's not there, is because who are they associated with? Disney.
Yeah. But now to my second question: vendor or attendee? Where do you have more fun?
Wow, that's hard to say because as an attendee, I get to go see everything.
Right.
I get to experience everything, see everything.
Take your time.
Take my time, check things out. As a vendor, it's still awesome because I get to sit and meet everybody that passes by.
You meet more people.
I literally draw people in and have conversations with them.
Yes.
Not necessarily because I'm trying to sell them something.
Right.
But because I'm literally, tell me what you're into. Tell me what you like.
Yeah.
If I have something that I can offer you, great. If not, let's just talk.
Yeah.
Let's just sit there and chat. But that's you and me. We're not really salesmen by trade. We're just geeks.
True.
So it's kind of a give and take. I like the freedom of moving about and checking everything out, taking breaks and chilling. Because as a vendor, you're there. You're in the moment, and you rarely get a break. I mean, I can say, Tracy, I'm gonna step out and I'm gonna grab a drink, or I'm gonna grab a smoke, or something like that. But
I feel the same way. To me, it's a double-edged sword. There's good and bad about both.
Right.
And I wouldn't want to do just one.
Right.
I mean, I enjoy both. I've enjoyed both experiences.
But as a vendor, I get to get there early and see all the stuff before people get there.
That's true. And other vendors will buy stuff from you before the show ever starts.
I literally was looking at this one artist. Man, if I wasn't trying to make a penny, I could have actually spent a penny.
Yeah.
At the last one we were at. All right, so I have some tips, tricks, do's and don'ts of going to a con, and I'm not talking about just Comic-Con, any con in general. And you've gone to enough cons that you probably can profess to certain things that you should prep for and get ready for, right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
So let me just rattle off some of my ideas, and you feel free to jump in and add to it. So first of all, especially if you've never gone to a con before, figure out what type of con you want to go to. Whether it's a convention about horror movies or boats or whatever it is you're into. Figure out what you want before you just go to any convention. 2, find out them dates. Them dates ain't going to change for you. You have to change for them dates, right? I have literally had to take vacation days, and I'm not upset about that. If you told me, hey, you got to take vacation, you can sit on the beach or you can go to a con, I'd rather go to a con. So it's good to pre-buy your tickets before the con.
Yeah, that way you don't have to stand in line.
Right,
forever.
you'd have to stand in line twice, one to purchase it and then one to turn it in. So go ahead and have those tickets pre-paid for, and either on your phone or printed out or whatever. Plus, if you know those dates and those dates are in advance, you get to save up some money. You get to give yourself a budget. You get to build up your budget, and you know exactly what you're willing to spend before you even go in the building. The size of the con. I know a lot of people think bigger is better, but in my opinion, that's not always true.
Right.
Like, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So, like, we've gone to small cons, like here in Frankfurt.
Right.
We've gone to Lexington. I've not yet hit San Diego, and I say not yet because I will one day. But I kind of like that mid-sized con because when it comes to seeing people, I don't have to wait in line as long.
You also have to realize this: when you go to when you're a vendor and you go to a larger con,
right,
you're paying more money for that booth space.
That's true.
So you got to make that money back before you start making profit.
Well, I'm not talking about going as a vendor. I'm just talking.
No. I'm talking about making a deal. So in other words, if I'm an attendee and I want to get a deal on a comic or a deal on a collectible figure, going to a bigger con really isn't in my favor. And the reason being is because he paid so much money for that booth space.
He has to make it.
He's got to make it back. And so where you can go to a smaller con and they pay a smaller amount, and it could be sometimes the same vendor.
Yeah.
But he
could sell one item and get that money back.
Right. So he can cut you a deal. So some of your smaller cons or medium-sized cons are better for the attendee if you're going to buy something.
Right.
You know, so you can find deals at cons. I mean, there's a group of brothers like you and myself that sell comics around here locally, and they're called the Buzzard Brothers. Well, the first thing I'll do when a con's around is I'll look to see if they're there. And if they are, I'll go, because those guys, they have reasonably priced back issues.
Okay.
And so I'll seek them out. And typically what I do is walk around the entire con. I know what I want before I get there.
Exactly.
And then I'll check prices. And when it comes to comics, I mean, they always beat everybody. And so, but if those same two brothers went to a large con and had to pay a larger amount,
right,
you know, they're not going to be able to offer the same deals.
Well, as far as dealing with money and vendors and things like that, in my opinion, I think that always carry cash. Not everybody, especially in some of the smaller vendors, don't have the little card readers on top of their phone.
Yeah, we don't. We were cash only.
Right, so it's cash only. So, and plus, at the end of like a 2 or 3 day con, a lot of people don't want to pack a lot of stuff home. So they're willing to actually bargain with you, you know?
Yeah, there's that last day.
Right.
But you take a chance of missing out on what you want.
Exactly.
Even on our end, I've had people come by and see something we had for sale and be like, wow, that's a great deal. But they didn't want to pull that trigger and buy it. And so they walk around and they come back and they're like, oh, it's gone.
That's understandable, though, because that's kind of like another rule that I've made here, or an ideal.
Yeah.
Is don't buy at the first booth you go to. You know, if you have a budget, you go to a booth and you spend all your money in it, like, then you get halfway through and you see that $250 Jeff Lebowski figure just come out by Sideshow, and you're like, oh crap, I just spent all my money at the front door. Yeah. So I understand that.
Yeah, but you also take a chance
at losing something,
of seeing something and being like, wow, that's a great deal. Then you walk the entire con, you come back to that great deal, and that great deal's gone. My opinion, now everybody's different. My opinion is you see something you want and you can afford to get it.
Okay.
There's been too many times where I will come back and be like, yeah, do you guys have that whatever? And they're like, no, man, we just sold it 5 minutes ago.
I understand that. I understand it. But I'm talking about new goers.
Okay,
all right. That's your experience. My experience is you should shop the con and go back. I understand that you might miss out on a deal. And if it is a deal, the best way to find out if it's a deal is take your phone, make sure it's charged, use your little Google app, and find out how much that's worth online. Figure out.
And people do that. People come up and they come up to our booth and they scan something.
Figure out what it's going to cost for shipping and handling.
And they see whether we're giving them a good deal or whether we're jerking them around.
And if not, you can actually show it to them and say, man, I can order this for cheaper. Sometimes they'll come down. Sometimes they'll be like, well, good luck.
Yeah, and if you go up to a vendor and they don't have a price on something, you pretty much guarantee it's too expensive.
Right, exactly.
I got a question for you.
Okay.
Now, this may be controversial, and I've never heard anybody talk about it in another YouTube video. But
okay.
And I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble, but how do you get by with selling all this copyrighted stuff? So let's say that I make a Batman figure, or I make a Batman painting, I make a Batman vinyl sticker, or Batman whatever. So I'm not Warner Brothers, and I don't have a Warner Brothers license. So I'm selling, and I mean, you see this at every Comic-Con. People making money with their 3D printers or what have you, their vinyl machines or their laser cutters. They're making money off copyrighted material. So how do you, I mean, bottom line, it's illegal. I mean, you know, the companies may let it go, but I mean, you're putting yourself at risk when you do that. I mean, you could have a representative from any, especially Disney, who owns like everything.
Do you think some Disney representative is going to come all the way to Frankfort, Kentucky to go to a con to make sure that somebody hasn't taken their little router and cut out a Batman symbol or a Deadpool?
No, I'm just saying you're flirting with disaster. In other words, if you're a small time vendor, you're making a little bit of money, yes, you may be under the radar and not worth messing with. But you go to some of these bigger cons. Where they're already there anyway. So at San Diego, Disney or some Warner Brothers or some of these other companies are there already. You know, and so you've got this big lavish setup and you're making money off.
If you're going to some place like San Diego.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If I make...
That'd be like me going over to the neighbor's yard and squatting beside his dog and taking a crap. He's there. He's seen me take a crap in his yard. But we're talking about, like, if I went back up in the woods, nobody know I'm crapping in the woods. Nobody cares.
Okay, yeah, but what I'm saying is like, you know, I mean, I can make whatever I want. A Baby Yoda. I made a Baby Yoda cradle, but I'm not trying to sell it. But if I did try to sell it, I'm putting myself at risk because that's copyrighted material. That's copyrighted stuff. So so what you're saying is,
if you
I don't have
a little bit, if you alter it a little bit, change it a little bit, and say, well, that's not Baby Yoda, that's Baby JoJo.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, but the thing is, I mean, and I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying I'm surprised as a person who goes to Comic-Cons, who goes in and sees all this copyrighted stuff being sold by people that don't have license. I'm surprised they don't get hammered. I'm surprised.
If they started hammering people,
you
start losing people.
Yeah,
because
maybe.
Actually, free publicity that you give out is better than no publicity at all. So if you come down and you put a squeeze on every little small vendor that's trying to sell something that might resemble your stuff, then you're going to probably put a squeeze on a lot of people in general. So letting a little bit slip is probably bringing you more money than it would be by just stopping it altogether.
See, there was a guy whose son had died, and his son was a huge...
We're getting off to a whole...
I know, but I'm getting ready to stop. And then you can finish up. But there was a guy whose son who had died, and he actually petitioned. Spider-Man was his little boy's favorite character. So he petitioned to have Spider-Man put on the gravestone. And Disney, who owns Marvel, was like, no, you can't do that. Now he did ask. Maybe he should have just
That's
done
his
it.
problem, is he asked.
Okay, all
You
right.
think Disney's going to start going through every freaking graveyard saying, is there an Iron Man over there on that tombstone? By golly, that's
Okay,
dig
all right.
that some buck up.
Okay, I'm done.
So anyway,
Go ahead.
getting back to our tips and tricks and do's and don'ts. Find out who some of the guests are at the con that you're going to. That's a big draw, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend, she liked going to the con, but the only reason she wanted to go to this one con was to see Ron Perlman. She wanted to get to see Ron Perlman, and that was the highlight of her day. She got Ron Perlman to sign her VHS videos, and that just made her freaking day. So see who's good there, see if it's somebody you might be interested in. Another tip I would suggest is take a friend. You know, going to a con by yourself is great, but if you can introduce somebody to a con, into your whatever your interest is, by all means, it's better to have somebody there. That's what conventions are about, is bringing people together. My daughter wanted to go to a Ren Fair. She was going with 4 other people, and they all backed out on her. She was still going to go, but she didn't want to go alone because it's more fun to go with somebody. So she called her dear old geeky daddy. Last minute, I didn't have a budget, but I didn't care. I got to spend quality time around like-minded people that liked the same thing. I didn't even have time to put a costume in, but I still, and I didn't even have a budget, but I ended up getting a cheap piece of jewelry that I still wear to this day. So I had a ball. So go with a friend. Let's see. Another tip I would offer is packing crap. When you purchase a lot of stuff, you don't want to travel for 4 or 5 hours carrying your body pillow with your sexy anime character around for 5 freaking hours. Take the opportunity to set a time of day, whether it's at lunch, to get back to your car, go back to your hotel room, drop that stuff off, right?
Yeah.
Free your stuff up. Now, as far as going back to the car.
Backpacks are good.
Right. Backpacks.
Yeah.
Carry merchandise. Have somebody else carry a bag with some water bottles. Make sure you carry water. But going back to the car, now I know you and your wife, you all go out to eat in local restaurants around the area.
Yeah. The vendor, typically your vendor food at a ComicCon is so expensive.
Right.
Just leave the con and usually there's some place that you can eat within walking distance.
We would go back out to our car. We'd have a cooler. We'd have drinks, ham, bread, sandwiches, cheese, chips. It gives us a chance to kick off our shoes, rest our dogs. Not real dogs, but rest our feet.
I got it.
Get out of our costumes for a little bit, breathe, build up some energy before we get back at it for the next couple of hours.
Yeah.
So take a break. You know, take some water, most definitely. When it goes back to packing crap, I suggest you take a sturdy folder. You're getting Ron Perlman's signature or a voice actor.
I actually bought a tube.
Right.
And that, you know, I take my movie posters in when I get them signed, and that way I can take them out and put them back in, and I can go through the crowd, bump into people, and don't have to worry about stuff.
There's nothing worse than reaching into a bag and pulling out your Picard picture. You just had a picture taken with Patrick Stewart, and it's all tore up.
Yeah.
So take something to protect those kind of things. Let's see. Where else am I?
You're right there.
Hand sanitizer.
Hand sanitizer.
You're touching all this merchandise. Everybody else is touched. Stay safe. Stay clean. Now,
but you can almost guarantee. I mean, a lot of people get sick when they go to con, but a lot of people get sick when they go around any group of people.
right.
You know, there was even something before COVID. It was called con crud, and basically you go to a ComicCon and you end up getting a flu or something like that.
Right.
Now, I've always been pretty lucky, but I don't go around sticking my hand in my mouth or my eyes either.
Right. So anywho, another thing I do is I shop. I know you said you're afraid you're missing out on a deal.
Yes.
But, and you always have an idea of what you're going after when you go.
Yes.
One year I was looking for some steampunk goggles. I'd made a plague doctor mask, and they wanted some goggles to go with it. Well, I come across this one booth, and they were selling the goggles for $15. Not bad, but, 2 aisles over, I found them for $7. Same thing.
Yeah.
So, look around, take a notebook, write down what you've seen.
You saved $8.
That's fine. But take a notes of where you're at. I've spent an hour one time trying to find another booth that I've found stuff at in the past. Number one, or no, it's not number one, but one of the main things is take your freaking manners. Be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of the people around you. I was dressed as Odin, and I tell you what, I was walking in 5 times through the whole con. I was like, because somebody stepped on my cape.
Did you punch them?
No, I just smited them with my staff. So be aware of the people around you. Realize that in these aisles, no matter what con you go to, they move like traffic. This side's going this way, and this side's coming this way. Don't jump across in front of a bunch of people to see something. I know, yeah, everybody does that.
Yeah, I jump across because sometimes there's something on the other aisle.
Go down a little bit, come across, and come back up, man. Be polite.
Go all the way down, come all the way back up.
Another thing. So, okay, and when I was dressed as
what I do is I'm just like, excuse me, pardon me, excuse me.
Yeah, well, it becomes kind of hectic when people are just like...
Yeah.
Even ants.
Yeah. I try to be nice. I say, excuse me, pardon me, thank you.
Okay, so one time, me and my sister went as, I went as Odin, she went as Hela. And we were traveling together, and people would stop us in the aisle to take pictures, and that's great, I get the bug, I get the cosplay bug.
Oh, yes, cool.
But when they stopped us, they didn't just stop us. They stopped people coming from either direction. Yeah. You stopped in whole aisle. So follow somebody to the end of the aisle and then say, hey, can I take your picture or something? I just want people to be polite.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I just want people to be nice. And be respectful to each other. Be respectful to each other, and don't think you can touch anything that's there, including the people. I know they put a lot of work into their costumes, and there's a lot of details. Don't walk up there and say, oh my God, how did you make that? That's awesome. That's just rude. They're still people. They still have their own aura. Stay the hell out of it. So, this is something new to me. This is a tip that I gave myself as of last year. Now I'm older, and our kids, I don't have to sit there and...
I'm older this year, too.
Really? Yeah. I don't have to sit there and watch the kids no more.
Yeah, because they're adults.
They can take off, right? I have found out something. I can purchase adult beverages at the con now.
Yeah.
Bring your license, because I used to just bring my cash and not bring anything else. I'd leave it all locked away. Bring your cash, so if you as an adult want to take a break and you don't want to go back to the car or your hotel, you can go have yourself an adult beverage and sit and chill and relax.
Or just have you some Fireball out in the trunk of your car. Well, do that too. I had a guy at last Lexington Con, I had a guy that said he would give me a free drink if I would stand in front of his booth and he could take a picture. I was dressed as Ben Kenobi.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And I said, yeah. He said, what drink do you want? I said, just make me something blue. And it was pretty good. It's pretty good. Yeah.
Man,
I said, hey, I'm going to be Gandalf the White tomorrow. Do I get another free drink? And he said, yeah, sure. So I come back the next day, got me another free drink.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow, he's going to lose money with you.
Yeah, I know.
So I was dressed as a Big Lebowski, and I went up to the bartender and asked him for a White Russian. Yeah, love my White Russian. And they were like, man, we just serve beer. I ain't making no drinks. I just gave you a beer.
But you forgive them because try to be nice. You didn't raise Cain.
I'm a dudist.
Yeah.
So my final and last suggestion, unless there's some suggestions you want to say.
No, I'm totally done.
Is have fun, right?
Yeah.
Relax, man. You're there to have fun. I have literally got tired, and I've got hot, and I've got irritable, and I literally have sucked the life out of children, which is hard to do. So don't be afraid to excuse yourself. Go chill, let them go on, call them later, and then come back. But stay in a good mood. You're there to have fun.
That's one thing I like to do multiple days at a con. And the reason being is because when you got one day,
Right.
you typically pick Saturday.
Right.
And that's the busiest day. And you feel like you need to put your eyes on every single thing in there. And you feel like you got a time limit. And I hate time limits. So
Yeah.
you're just going through there in a mad rush trying to see everything. And it takes some of the pleasure out of it.
Yeah,
Whereas
it does.
like where we go for at least a couple of days, you know, we can take our time and look at stuff because we're going to walk through there a couple times,
Right.
and we're not pressed for time. We're not
Right.
pressed for time.
All right.
You done?
Finally.
All right. Well,
I'm done. Are you done?
I'm done. All right. I think we're done. See you, man.
Hey, see you, it's gone.
Yeah.